They burned my barn just because I said no. No to leasing my land. No to pretending their HOA rules applied to my ranch. No to being bullied by a group of clipboard tyrants who thought signatures bought obedience. They thought the fire would scare me. They thought ash would cover the boundary line they kept crossing. But what they forgot is that some of us don't fight with flames. We fight with stone, with silence, with strategy. So while they danced around their brand new luxury pool, laughing, sipping drinks, I called in a favor from the concrete yard down the highway. And 15 cement trucks later, their pool wasn't sparkling anymore. It was buried, like their lies, like their pride. You torch my past, I'll bury your future that I'd always said no politely, firmly, but without venom. So when they first approached me, two suited board members with their fresh clipboards and rehearsed smiles, I let them talk. We're developing a new green space plan, the tall one said, eyes darting around my pasture like he was scanning a floor plan. And your south property line would be perfect for a decorative stone path and small overlook. I leaned against the fence, hands rough with dust and wire from morning chores. That strip you're pointing at? I said. It's mine. Of course, he nodded, like he was reassuring me. But the HOA would handle the landscaping. We'd even maintain it. It's purely aesthetic. No, Invia. Their smiles froze like cooling concrete. No to what? The short one asked, pen already twitching over a printed agreement. No to all of it, I said. My land's not for lease. Not for walking paths. Not for HOA parties or gazebos. It's private. They left without another word. But the silence didn't last long. By the end of the week, I'd received a friendly reminder in the mail from the Ridge Valley Estates HOA. Property Edge appears to be hosting non-permitted storage. Please remove all equipment within 30 feet of community-facing boundary. The equipment? My hay trailer, parked under a tree line that's been there longer than the HOA itself. The week after that, a zoning inspector showed up unannounced. Said he was responding to a report of improper drainage flow affecting neighborhood landscaping. He wore a hard hat, but no boots. Never stepped past my gravel. The week after that, they called the county about noise violations related to my tractor. I use it twice a day, at 8:30 a.m. and 5:15 p.m. Same as always. Then came the night visits. Twice in 1 week, I caught someone pulling up near the property line around midnight. Lights off. Quiet. Both times I walked out with my flashlight and a sidearm. Both times the car sped off without a word. Still, I held the line. Replaced my locks. Installed new trail cams. Didn't retaliate. I've lived on this ranch for 27 years. Inherited it from my father. He built the barn with his hands, with wood cut from this soil, under sun that fed every post. I wasn't going to be bullied. But bullies don't like no. It happened on a Wednesday. I was out late helping a neighbor pull a stuck calf from a shallow creek about 2 miles out. Got back around midnight. Sky was black velvet, stars blinking like they knew a secret. But I could smell it before I saw it. Smoke. I hit the ridge, and everything inside me clenched. The barn was lit like a funeral pyre. Flames licking the roof. Paint curling. Tin sheeting popping like gunfire. I screamed before I stopped the truck. Screamed so loud the air shook. By the time the volunteer fire crew got there, it was too late. The barn was gone. They let me walk the ruins the next morning. Charboards. Collapsed beams. A horseshoe melted into a warped spiral. Tools fused into sludge. The air still held that sour, oily bite of gasoline. Suspicious burn pattern, the fire marshal said, squinting through the steam rising off the ashes. Too symmetrical. Too fast. Someone helped this fire along. He paused. You got security? I nodded. Just installed some trail cams last month. That night, I pulled the footage. South side, 11:42 p.m. Two figures in hooded jackets. One pours something from a red canister. The other lights a flare. The camera caught their outline, just enough. One had a limp. The other wore HOA logo windbreaker. I filed the report. Turned over the video. The sheriff's office logged it. Promised to follow up. But days passed. Then weeks. No arrest. No search. No urgency. Just a shrug from the deputy and a flyer from the HOA the next week. Coming soon, Ridge Valley Estates luxury pool expansion and wellness garden. The map showed it clearly. Their plan swallowed the exact land I refused to lease, right up to where the barn had stood. I stood in the blackened footprint of my father's barn and felt nothing but steel settle into my bones. I wasn't angry, not the way they were. They acted from panic, from power that had never been tested. Me, I had patience and purpose, and every permit I need already hanging in the file cabinet of the county office. The fire didn't kill me, but the silence afterward almost did. The kind of silence that smells like cover-ups and feels like a handshake behind a locked door. I walked into the sheriff's office 3 days after the blaze, report folder under my arm. The front desk deputy looked up, then down, like he already knew. I asked for updates. He gave me a shrug. Still pending. We're coordinating with Ridge Valley HOA to see if any of their contractors were in the area. My brow twitched. Why would you be coordinating with the HOA instead of serving them subpoenas? Another shrug. That was the first time I realized the fire wouldn't be solved by them. It would be solved by me. I started pulling every document I could find. Inspection records, zoning reports, emergency calls, permits filed by Ridge Valley over the last 6 months. At first, it felt like chasing shadows, but patterns emerged. A fire inspection had been requested for my barn 2 months prior, filed anonymously. The report came back safe, but the complaint remained open. It was flagged internally by community concern. I pulled the name of the inspector, a local guy named Lem Hargrove. I'd known him for years, used to play softball with his older brother. I found Lem sitting in his county truck outside a taco stand. They asked me not to make it official, he said, mouth half full of carne asada. Said if I marked it unsafe, the HOA could escalate a safety complaint. But if I didn't, they'd get the county commissioner involved. They who? He wiped his mouth. Didn't answer. Meanwhile, the HOA was partying. I watched from my back pasture as they erected banners, folding chairs, floral arches, prepping for what their flyer called Ridge Valley Estates Grand Pool Expansion Launch Event, featuring fire pit, outdoor bar, and scenic fence line upgrade. The scenic fence line ran right up to where my barn had stood. They never once knocked, never once apologized. But their landscapers came close enough I could smell their cologne and hear them joke about the crispy rancher with the pitchfork. The community started splitting. Some neighbors, old-timers who knew the land, dropped off a pie, a card, or just a handshake. Others stopped making eye contact. Whispers spread. Maybe the barn had faulty wiring. Maybe he's exaggerating. Maybe he's bitter caused the HOA's improving the area. Improving? I found half-burnt horseshoes in my pasture. Call that an improvement? I started documenting everything. Every time a landscaper crossed the property line to trim bushes. Every time a new construction marker was staked without a permit tag. I installed new motion sensors, new perimeter lighting, set up a drone on auto sweep. Within 2 weeks, I caught 3 separate crews trespassing, once with measuring tape. I confronted them each time. Calm, clear. You step 1 foot over my line again, I call the state. They laughed. The next day, I got a letter from the HOA. We've received multiple reports of you threatening community staff. Cease all harassment immediately. The audacity boiled slow, not like a flash of rage, but like a pressure cooker ticking under your ribs. It was about more than a barn. It was about power. They wanted me quiet, boxed in, tamed like a petting zoo outside their perfect picket fences. But I wasn't a pet. I was a storm waiting for the right wind. I filed a formal complaint with the county, cited failure to investigate arson, cited evidence of regulatory pressure from HOA officials, filed public records requests, 17 of them, cross-referenced HOA board member names with campaign donations to zoning commissioners. Wouldn't you know, 2 of them donated to the county planning chair's re-election fund. $3,000. Quiet. Convenient. The more I dug, the more rotten the roots looked. The HOA had been pushing south for over a year. Expanding. Absorbing. Leasing land. Squeezing out old farmers with beautification violations. They called it growth. I called it creep. And now, they were building their monument to themselves. A glistening pool expansion right up against a field still blackened from their last improvement. I went to the planning office, asked to see the HOA's updated pool permit. They handed it over, smiling. I flipped to the boundary lines. And I smiled too, because I recognized something no one else seemed to. They were building too close. Way too close. According to County Ordinance 11.3b, any community recreational facility must retain a 25-foot buffer from adjoining private agricultural land unless granted an easement or written permission. They had neither. They had assumed I'd cave, that the fire would make me sell, or at least shut up. Instead, it gave me purpose. I walked out with a copy of the ordinance in one hand, and a plan in the other. IT started with a clipboard. Not a threat, not a weapon, not even a warning. Just one clipboard and a very specific permit. Application, private agricultural access route. Purpose, livestock and equipment movement. Path, along southern edge of ranch bordering HOA fencing. Materials, compactable gravel, light-grade cement substructure. Authority, County Department of Agriculture. Stamped, approved, logged. They never even read it. Because while the HOA was hosting mixology workshops and sunrise yoga meetings, I was laying the first line of defense, paperwork. From the road, it just looked like I was leveling a patch of dirt. Nothing unusual, nothing flashy. A few neighbors noticed, sure. New road, old one washed out in the rain. I'd say, wiping sweat from my neck. They nodded, offered a soda, moved on. But beneath the surface, I was laying more than gravel. I was laying bait. I regraded the slope behind their new pool deck. Subtle, just enough. Didn't breach their boundary. Didn't violate mine. But I adjusted it with laser precision so that anything poured at the top edge of my new road would flow with a gentle angle, right through the gap in their newly installed wrought iron pool fencing. Their mistake? They hadn't sealed the bottom properly, left too much room to let the ground breathe. I was about to show them how much it could drown instead. The day before their grand HOA summer celebration kickoff, I called in the final order. 15 trucks, 10 yards of cement each, delivered in one continuous chain. The supplier hesitated. That's a big pour. It's for a cattle trough foundation, I said. I've got permits. Gonna need 5 flaggers and a buffer lane. All arranged. Because it was. I'd cleared it with county traffic control under the exact guidelines of agricultural construction. The trucks would come, one after the other, right through the front ranch gate, and stop, 12 feet from their pool line. The night before, I stayed up late, walked the new road with a flashlight, checked the regrade slope, ran a test, 2 5-gallon buckets of water, watched them pour, and slowly snaked down the angled line, disappearing right under the lowest edge of the fence. Perfect. Then I took down the orange safety cones, pulled back the temporary barricade, and texted the cement foreman 2 words. Dawn delivery. By 7:12 a.m., the first truck rolled in. The HOA hadn't stirred yet. Their string lights still blinked across the pool deck, plastic flamingos bobbing in the breeze. By 7:26, the second truck backed up to the first. I signaled the foreman. The chute swung over my gravel, and we started to pour. Slow at first, thick and clean, a pure gray ribbon of justice. By the time the third truck arrived, the sound had changed. Now boots thudded on deck wood, and confused HOA voices carried over the fence. What is he doing? That's concrete. Why is that concrete? He's building something. Then the fourth truck reversed, engine growling low. By now, the cement had crept past the line of pine bushes. It touched the fence line, and then it slipped under. Karen's voice cracked the air like a whip. Stop that truck right now. She stormed out in flip-flops and a silk robe that didn't belong on gravel, waved her arms like she could part trucks with willpower. I waved back, calm, then pointed to the copy of my permit stapled to the post beside her fence. Agricultural access road, I said. Fully permitted. County approved. Don't worry, it's all downhill. The fifth truck dumped its payload. By now, the concrete had crept like a quiet tide, swelling under their deck, around the base of the pool lounge, and past the legs of 4 unclaimed folding chairs. Karen screamed, "You're trespassing. This is sabotage." I pointed again. Not trespassing. Not sabotage. Just gravity. HOA board members ran outside, phones in hand, calling cops, shouting legal words they barely understood. But the sheriff didn't come, because I'd already called them that morning, filed a noise notice about their planned 9 a.m. speaker test, then texted the deputy a heads up just in case someone misinterpreted the trucks. He texted back one emoji, thumbs up. The 6th, 7th, and 8th trucks came and went like ghosts. By now, the pool had become a peninsula, cut off on 3 sides by a growing cement field. People tried moving chairs, then realized the cement was already setting. By the 10th truck, the deck was abandoned. By the 12th, Karen had stopped screaming. She just stood with her arms crossed, mouth twitching, watching her empire solidify, literally. Truck 15 rolled in at exactly 9:41 a.m. The driver climbed out, wiping his brow. "You sure this is legal?" I pointed to the laminated permit, still flapping in the breeze. "All filed, all clean, all mine." He nodded. "Well, it's definitely beautiful work." He hit the pump, and the final pour began. By 10:15 a.m., it was over. Where once stood a glittering HOA pool deck, tiki torches, chaise lounges, pink-rimmed margarita glasses, there was now a perfectly sloped, 18-inch thick concrete slab. It sparkled in the sun. Smooth, gray, quiet, like a tombstone. I set a small wooden sign in front of it. Hand-carved, walnut, in memory of good fences and what happens without them. By the time the last concrete truck pulled away, the pool was gone. Just gone. The crystal blue water, the tiki torches, the $80,000 luxury stone deck. Every tile, every inch, smothered under 6 feet of fast-setting cement. Smooth as silence, cold as justice. Karen stood frozen, with her clipboard clutched like a useless sword. Behind her, HOA board members murmured like confused cult followers. Half the community had shown up for mimosas. Now, they stood in beachwear, staring at a tomb. I didn't say a word, just tipped my hat, turned around, and walked back to the fence line. But the Real show was just beginning. At exactly 11:02 a.m., the sheriff's SUV rolled in. Karen had called him. Of course she had. She'd probably called him before the 5th truck even arrived. He stepped out, slow and casual, took off his sunglasses, and the minute he saw me leaning on my gate, he gave the faintest smile. This wasn't the city, and I wasn't just a name on some nuisance report. He already knew who I was. "Mr. Garrison," he said, nodding. "Heard there was some concrete excitement out here today." I gestured toward the steaming gray slab. "Agricultural road project. Fully permitted." Karen marched toward him in a fury, pool party sandals clapping against newly stained concrete. "This man buried our pool. That's destruction of community property." "On his land?" the sheriff asked, eyebrow raised. "It's bordering," she snapped. "It affected our fence line, our amenities. This is criminal vandalism." I handed the sheriff my laminated permit copy. Stamped, signed, dated. He read it, then looked at her. "Karen," he said, "this paperwork is clean. In fact, I believe I signed off on the security for the vehicle route myself last week." She blinked. You knew. You didn't read the county bulletins?" The HOA board huddled like penguins on a melting glacier. The crowd behind them grew. Phones were out. Neighbors whispered. One guy popped a beer and leaned on the HOA lounge table like he was watching a 4th of July parade. The sheriff flipped through my paperwork again. "Slope grade checks out. Road permit is real. No trespass. No encroachment. No damages filed." Karen's voice cracked. "But he ruined the pool." "No, ma'am," the sheriff said. "He poured concrete on his side of the fence. That your pool drainage wasn't sealed properly." He shrugged. "Sounds like a design flaw. But the runoff. You paved too close to his property," he cut her off. "No easement filed. Noble fair. And according to our code, you should have had a 25-foot setback. He gave you more than that till today." Karen's clipboard dropped. Literally. It hit the concrete with a slap and slid sideways. Then came the news van. Channel 5. Local. A young reporter hopped out with a mic and a camera operator already filming. "We got a call about a civil dispute and concrete." The sheriff chuckled. "You're a little late, but the scenery's fresh." Karen tried to block the camera. "You can't film this. This is private HOA property." The reporter turned to me. "Sir, did you pour this entire section yourself?" 15 trucks, I said. "All within my legal right. Just improving my AG path per permit. Gravity handled the rest. And the HOA burned down my barn 2 months ago," I said. "Calm. Clear. I reported it. Nothing happened. This was just rebuilding. One layer at a time." That line? It aired. That night, the local segment opened with, "HOA torches rancher's barn. He responds with cement justice." It got 87,000 views by morning. Karen didn't speak after that. She just stood next to the lifeless pool deck-turned memorial slab while the HOA board melted around her. But the final nail came from inside. A man stepped forward, tall, bald. HOA Treasurer Dan Whitmore. Usually the quiet one. "I move we call an emergency session," he said. "Vote to remove President Karen Lunsfield from her seat effective immediately." There was a pause. Then hands raised. "Fust." Unanimous. Karen's jaw trembled. "You're siding with him?" Dan didn't answer. Another board member said, "We're siding with law and reason." I didn't clap, didn't smirk, didn't say "I told you so," but I did step forward one last time, reached into my truck, pulled out a red sign with metal stakes, walked right up to the edge of the concrete slab, where the HOA's pool used to be, pressed it into the still-drying cement, just deep enough to stand forever. It read, "Boundary respected. Lesson poured." The sheriff tipped his hat. The camera guy zoomed in, and as I turned to leave, I heard someone in the crowd say, "He should run the HOA." Another voice replied, "No, he should run the county." It took 6 weeks to rebuild the barn. Not because of the work, though that was plenty, but because every time a neighbor showed up to help, they brought more than tools. They brought stories. They brought apologies. They brought casseroles and extra hands and teenage sons who didn't know a thing about hammering until they did. The beams went up fast. The walls came slower, with care. We left one corner of the new interior exposed. Charred timber from the original, preserved like a scar that healed without hiding. We built it back better, but we didn't erase what happened. That barn had stood for 60 years. This one would last longer, because now it wasn't just mine. Karen resigned 2 days after the concrete settled. Technically, she stepped down to focus on personal matters, but everyone knew better. What followed was the kind of reckoning you only see when silence finally breaks. HOA members, many of them the same folks who once backed Karen without question, filed a class action suit against the board. Misuse of funds, harassment, illegal construction, lack of transparency. Turns out, luxury pool decks built without proper drainage can really dry up a leadership career. The board was dissolved, reformed, and this time, people voted with open eyes. The new president? A retired school principal named Donnie. Soft-spoken, practical, allergic to drama. He reached out to me personally. Showed up with 2 pieces of paper. One was an apology letter signed by the entire new board. The other? A formal neighborhood agreement drafted with my input. It outlined clear boundary policies, mutual respect clauses, and, most importantly, a permanent no-build zone along our shared fence line. We both signed it. Then we shook hands. No cameras, no fanfare, just peace. With the barn restored and the concrete set, I turned my attention outward. Kids from town started coming by on weekends, first just to look, then to help. I showed them how to muck stalls, fix a gate, ride without fear. A couple of them had never seen a chicken up close. One girl named Riley asked if she could plant flowers in the barn's east corner. "Why?" I asked. She smiled. "Because you rebuilt it, and I think flowers deserve to grow where something survived." So we planted wild sunflowers and bluebonnets. They're blooming now. And the pool? It's still there. Buried. Fenced in. Untouched. The HOA wanted to remove the concrete slab, but the community voted to leave it. Not as punishment, no. As a reminder. They installed a bench beside it. A little bronze plaque beneath the armrest reads, "Respect is the strongest foundation. This ground remembers." I walk past it sometimes on morning rides. And every time I nod once, not at the pool but at the fence. Because some lines aren't meant to be crossed. And others? Well, they're meant to be held. They thought fire would break me. thought burning down my barn would make me bow. They didn't understand the kind of man who builds with calloused hands, or what it means to wake before dawn, every day, for a land that never promises ease. You don't shake a man like that. You don't scare him with code violations or backdoor politics. And you sure as hell don't think you can burn down his history without igniting something much bigger. What they destroyed with fire, I rebuilt with patience. What they mocked with arrogance, I answered with stone. And when they tried to pave over the past, I showed them how fast cement sets when you've got the law and the land on your side. That barn was my father's. That fence line was my grandfather's. And that line they crossed, that was mine. So I gave them a monument they couldn't decorate, a lesson they couldn't erase, and a silence louder than any speech. You torch my past, I'll bury your pride, in concrete, forever.